The house looks smaller than he remembers, which seems impossible since nothing about his mother's world was ever small. Rose Pacino filled every room she entered with her voice, her opinions, her fierce love that felt like judgment, and her judgment that felt like abandonment. But standing on the front steps with the key the funeral director gave him 3 days ago, Al Pacino sees only a modest two-story house in Queens. Unremarkable, except for the garden his mother tended, until the arthritis in her hands made it impossible to kneel among the tomatoes. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe, comment, and like it. She died on a Tuesday, while he was in Los Angeles meeting with producers about a film he probably won't make. The call came from Mrs. Benedetto next door, who found Rose collapsed in her kitchen, still wearing the apron she put on every morning at 7 o'clock to make coffee and plan her day. By the time Al Pacino flew back to New York, arranged the funeral, dealt with the lawyers and the cemetery and the endless paperwork that death requires, 4 days had passed. 4 days of performing grief for people who expected Al Pacino to mourn his mother in ways that would confirm their assumptions about celebrity and family and the price of fame. The funeral itself was a carefully orchestrated performance, managed by his publicist and attended by people who knew his mother as Al Pacino's mother rather than as Rose Pacino, the woman who worked double shifts at a department store to pay for acting classes, who saved every review of every play he appeared in during his struggling years, who worried about him in ways that had nothing to do with his career and everything to do with his soul. Now he's alone in the house where he spent summers as a child, where his mother lived for 43 years after his father died, where she aged and worried and probably wondered what happened to the son she raised versus the public figure he became. The silence feels different from the expensive silence of his Manhattan apartment. This is the silence of absence rather than isolation, the quiet that comes when someone who talked constantly is no longer there to fill the space with words. The key turns easily in the lock, and the door opens to reveal the front hallway exactly as he left it 6 months ago during his last dutiful visit. His mother kept the house like a museum of their family's better days, when his father was alive and Al Pacino was still Alfredo, and the future held promise instead of the weight of managing success that had grown larger than the person it was supposed to serve. He starts in the living room, where his mother kept the good furniture covered in plastic and the photographs of family members arranged on every surface like a shrine to people who were mostly dead or estranged. His own face appears in dozens of frames, movie stills and publicity shots and formal portrait from award ceremonies he attended, because his publicist said it was good for his image. But there are no candid photos of him, no pictures that capture him simply being her son rather than being Al Pacino. The photographs tell the story of their relationship's evolution from intimate to professional. Early pictures show a young woman holding a baby, then a boy at birthday parties and school events, then fewer and fewer casual moments until the images become entirely public. Red carpet appearances, premiere photos, the kind of pictures that appear in magazines rather than family albums. The kitchen still smells like garlic and olive oil, and the particular combination of spices she used in everything she cooked. Her coffee cup sits in the sink, unwashed, lipstick still marking the rim in a shade of red she wore for 60 years. The sight of it stops him cold, this intimate evidence of her final morning, the routine she completed not knowing it would be her last time making coffee, not knowing she had hours rather than years ahead. On the kitchen table, her reading glasses rest on top of a folded newspaper open to the crossword puzzle, half completed in her careful handwriting. Next to it, a shopping list. Milk, bread, oranges, the mundane needs of ordinary life that continue even when life itself is ending. The normalcy of these objects feels surreal in the context of death, as if the universe should have provided some sign that this Tuesday would be different from all the Tuesdays that came before. He opens cabinets mechanically, sorting through dishes and pots and the accumulated kitchen equipment of someone who cooked with devotion until the end. Most of it will go to charity, items too specific to her cooking style or too worn to be useful to anyone else. But he sets aside the wooden spoon she used to stir sauce, the small saucepan perfect for heating milk, the cast iron skillet that belonged to his grandmother. Objects that carry memory in their weight, their familiar damage, their decades of use. In the refrigerator, he finds evidence of her final days. a container of leftover pasta sauce, vegetables beginning to wilt, milk that will expire next week. She had been planning meals she would never cook, saving leftovers for lunches she would never eat. The refrigerator magnets hold appointment cards for doctors she'll never see again, reminders about tasks that are now someone else's responsibility. The basement holds boxes of Christmas decorations, old furniture, and the kind of items people save without knowing why. His mother was a careful keeper of things, someone who believed objects had stories worth preserving even when no one remained to remember what those stories were. He finds boxes of his father's clothes, still neatly folded 20 years after the funeral, as if she expected him to return someday and need them. Other boxes contain Al Pacino's childhood belongings, report cards, school projects, the participation trophies that meant so much when he was 8 years old. His mother had saved everything, creating an archive of the boy he used to be before the world started paying attention to him. Looking through these artifacts, he can barely connect to the child who made these drawings, wrote these essays, believed that growing up meant becoming happier rather than more complicated. There are boxes of newspaper clippings about his career, carefully cut out and organized chronologically, a complete record of his public life maintained by someone who understood that fame is temporary, but mothers are supposed to remember everything. The early reviews are enthusiastic, full of words like promising and intense and authentic. The later ones are more measured, professional, the kind of reviews that praise competence rather than discovery. It's in a box marked important papers that he finds the letters. They're in a manila envelope, his name written on the outside in his mother's careful handwriting, the kind of penmanship they taught in Catholic school before computers made handwriting obsolete. Inside are 17 letters, all addressed to him, all written but never sent over the course of the last 5 years. The dates are marked in the upper right corner of each page, and the first one begins with "My dear Alfredo," the name she used when he was young, before the world started calling him Al Pacino. He sits on an overturned box in the basement, surrounded by the archaeology of his mother's life, and reads his own judgment delivered in her familiar handwriting. "I watched you on the television tonight. The first letter begins, dated 3 years ago. That interview where they asked about family, and you said you were grateful for everything your mother did for you. The words were right, but your face looked like you were reciting lines from a script. I wanted to call and tell you that you don't have to lie about loving me. Not for television, people who don't care about either of us. But I knew you wouldn't answer, and if you did, you would give me the same performance." The honesty cuts deeper than criticism, sharper than anger. His mother wasn't accusing him of not loving her. She was observing that he had forgotten how to love anyone without performing love, how to be grateful without performing gratitude. Even his sincerity had become artificial, filtered through the machinery of image management, until authentic emotion was indistinguishable from professional necessity. The basement feels colder as he continues reading, though the temperature hasn't changed. It's the cold of recognition, of being seen clearly by someone who loved him enough to tell the truth, even when the truth was painful. His mother had watched him transform from a son into a public figure, had witnessed the gradual replacement of authentic emotion with professional competence. The second letter, dated 6 months later, describes watching one of his recent films. "You were very good in it, technically speaking. Every gesture perfect, every word delivered exactly right. But I kept thinking about the boy who used to practice speeches in my kitchen mirror, how his whole body would change when he became someone else. That boy disappeared into characters completely. This man in the movie, he looked like he was remembering how to be someone else rather than actually becoming them." She had seen what critics and audiences, and even his directors hadn't noticed or didn't want to acknowledge. That his performances had become mechanical, professionally competent, but emotionally hollow. His mother, who never studied acting or understood the business of entertainment, had detected the absence of authentic transformation that marked the difference between craftsmanship and art. "I know you work very hard," another letter continues, "and I know there are pressures I don't understand. But sometimes I wonder if you remember why you wanted to be an actor in the first place. It wasn't for money or fame or any of the things you have now. It was because you loved disappearing, loved finding truth in made-up people. When did that stop being enough?" The question haunts him as he continues reading. When had it stopped being enough? When had the joy of transformation been replaced by the obligation to maintain his reputation? When had he stopped choosing roles because they excited him and started choosing them because they were safe, expected, likely to preserve rather than challenge his established image. He thinks about his recent film choices, roles selected by committee based on market research and demographic analysis rather than artistic intuition. When was the last time he chose a part because it scared him, because it required him to find something new about himself or human nature? When was the last time he disappeared completely into a character instead of bringing Al Pacino to the character? The letters chronicle his mother's growing frustration, not with his success, but with what success had done to him. She wrote about missing the son who used to call her every Sunday, who would arrive unannounced on Saturday afternoons to help with groceries or fix something that was broken. That son had been replaced by someone who scheduled visits through assistants, who brought photographers to family dinners, who seemed incapable of being present without also being Al Pacino. "I understand that you can't live the life you had before," she wrote in a letter dated last Christmas. "But you could choose to live some kind of life instead of just managing your image. You could find people who see you as human rather than as a commodity. You could remember that being Alfredo was enough before anyone cared about Al Pacino." The criticism wasn't about his career choices or his wealth or his fame. It was about his humanity, about the slow erosion of whatever essential self had existed before success began requiring him to perform constantly for audiences of strangers who would never know him and didn't need. One letter, written during what he now realizes must have been a period of depression for her, is particularly devastating. "I watch you on television accepting awards and making speeches about how grateful you are, and I believe that you mean it. But I also think you don't know what you're grateful for anymore. You're grateful for success, for recognition, for all the external validation. But are you grateful for being alive? For having been born? For the simple fact of existing as yourself rather than as what other people need you to be?" The question stops him completely. Is he grateful for being alive? Not for being successful or famous or wealthy, but for the basic fact of existence, for consciousness, for the daily experience of being human in the world? He can't answer immediately, which might be answer enough. Most days feel like obligations to fulfill rather than opportunities to experience. He wakes up to schedules created by other people, attends meetings about project design to maintain his market value, gives interviews where he performs enthusiasm about work that increasingly feels meaningless. When was the last time he felt genuine excitement about being alive, about the simple fact of consciousness and possibility that each day offers? The later letters grow shorter, but more direct. His mother had apparently decided that subtle criticism wasn't reaching him, so she began stating her observations with the bluntness of someone who had nothing left to lose by telling the truth. "You came for Easter dinner and spent the whole time on your phone," one brief letter reads. "I cooked for 6 hours and you ate for 20 minutes. Then you had your assistant call to thank me. I wanted to say that I raised you better than that, but I'm not sure I did. Maybe I should have taught you that success without humanity is just another kind of failure." He remembers that Easter dinner, remembers being frustrated that his mother didn't understand the urgency of the calls he was taking, the deals that were being negotiated, the professional obligations that couldn't wait for family meals to end. But reading her letter now, he understands that she saw exactly what was happening. His inability to be present anywhere except in the managed performance of his career. Another letter, written just 2 months before she died. "I dream about the boy you used to be. In the dreams, you're 8 years old, and you're showing me a drawing you made at school. You're so proud of it, so excited to share something you created. Your whole face lights up when you see that I like it. I wake up and wonder when you stop caring whether I liked anything you did. Maybe when you stop needing me to like it. Maybe that's what growing up means, but it feels like losing something important." The image she describes is vivid enough that he can almost remember it. The excitement of creating something, the pure desire to share it with someone who mattered, the uncomplicated pleasure of approval from someone who loved him. When had he stopped seeking that kind of connection? When had he replaced the desire for authentic approval with a more manageable goal of professional recognition? The final letter, written just 2 weeks before her death, is the longest and most painful. She writes that she knows she won't be around much longer, that she sees the truth in the doctors' faces. She wonders what kind of mother she was, whether she prepared him for the life he chose or the life she wanted for him. She wanted him to be successful, she says, but happy more. And somewhere along the way, she confused those priorities measuring his worth by achievement instead of character. She tells him she sees someone who is everything he thought he wanted and nothing he actually needs. Money, fame, opportunity, but no peace, no real love, no one who knows him completely and chooses him anyway. She admits she once thought she was that person until he began performing even for her, becoming Al Pacino, even in her kitchen. Her greatest regret, she writes, is that she never taught him how to fail, to be ordinary, to make mistakes, to be human. Maybe if she had shown him she would love him even if he never became special, he would have remembered that being special isn't the same as being whole. She never sent these letters, she says, because she didn't want to burden him. But she hopes he remembers that before he was Al Pacino, he was Alfredo, and Alfredo was enough. Al Pacino sits in the basement holding the letter, surrounded by boxes and the weight of everything she never said aloud. She had seen through his success to the person underneath, understood that fame hadn't fulfilled him but hollowed him out. Her disappointment was not about his career, but about his humanity. The letters reveal that she had been mourning him for years, watching success replace the son she loved with a carefully managed public figure. She worried about his soul, about happiness without authenticity, and carried that worry alone because even her concern had become another pressure he was expected to manage. He remembers their last phone call, when she asked how he was doing, and he answered with updates about work and projects. True, but not real. She had been reaching for Alfredo, and he had responded as Al Pacino. As evening falls, he reads about the moments she knew she was losing him. The first security guard at a family gathering, the first interview where she didn't recognize his answers, the politeness that replaced real emotion. One letter reminds him that he used to argue with her, used to be angry, used to trust her enough to be real. Now he was too careful, too afraid of disappointing anyone to show who he actually was. The accuracy cuts deep. Well, had he stopped trusting anyone enough to be himself? He folds the letters and looks around the basement filled with the evidence of her life, but understands that the letters are the true inheritance. They are proof that he was loved enough to be seen clearly, criticized honestly, more not for what he achieved, but for what he lost. In the kitchen, where her coffee cup still sits, he realizes what he has truly lost. Not just his mother, but the last person who knew him before fame erased him. She wasn't disappointed by his failures, but by how success made failure and real human experience impossible. Her letters document his disappearance into Al Pacino, one careful choice at a time. The house will be sold, the belongings dispersed, but he carries the letters with him as he leaves for the last time, understanding they are not judgment, but a final gift. Standing outside, he knows they offer no solutions, only clarity, the kind that comes from being truly known. And as he walks toward his car, he understands that for the first time in years, someone's disappointment in him feels like love rather than burden, like the beginning of a conversation rather than the end. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment with your thoughts on a video. I always enjoy reading your feedback.